ऐसे गैर जिम्मेदाराना तरीके से पाकिस्तान द्वारा भारत को अनेक बार एटमी धमकियां दी गई हैं कि क्या ऐसे गैर जिम्मेदार और रोग नेशन के हाथों में परमाणु हथियार सुरक्षित हैं?
A very good evening. You're watching the News Night and I'm Deepthi Sachdeva. In an unprecedented clarion call to who's who of the concerned world, you have India's Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh, who's asked the uncomfortable question. And he's also saying that the international community now needs to control and monitor the dangerous nukes that we are looking at the hands of Pakistan. And that was the clear, unequivocal message from him. He's called Pakistan a rogue state for the very first time, the Raksha Mantri of the country. Also, for the very first time, India has openly labelled Pakistan as such while sharply condemning that reckless nuclear blackmail. Remember, the Prime Minister also spoke about this? Now, Rajnath Singh's call for the International Atomic Energy Agency, that is the IAEA, to supervise Pakistan's nuclear weapons is also important. Now, this also marks a historic escalation because it is challenging the world now to confront that unsettling question, a question that a lot of people possibly could be afraid to ask. That can such a nation with a history of irresponsible threats be trusted with weapons of mass destruction? Should the global community not take an urgent note? Clearly, that is going to be a big debate that we'll keep our focus on with a panel of guests joining us in just a moment, as we also ask that who really will tame Pakistan? Is it time to tame the Pakistani nukes? You have Rajnath Singh's explosive initiative. I do see a panel of guests joining us. I'll take a moment to introduce all of them before we put out our straight questions, as always we do on the show. It's a pleasure to have Dr. Tara Kartha, the former Director of National Security Council Secretariat, is with us. I also do see Major Manik M. Jolly, who's a defense analyst. Sir, thank you and welcome also to the show. And I also do see Dr. Zorawar Daulat Singh, a strategic affairs expert, also waiting for Robert Dobbs to join us in just a moment. And with your permission, Dr. Tara and all gentlemen, I want to first up put out our straight questions, because this is where our conversation will essentially be centered. The first straight question is an important one. Who controls the Pakistani nukes? Remember, this is a question that has been asked for the longest time. Is it the civilian government that otherwise also has zero control when it comes to Pakistan, or it is the rogue army, GHQ Rawalpindi, the deep state? This brings us to our second straight question again. Now that's going to go up on your screens, and that reads, can Pakistan be trusted with nukes? Remember, you know the kind of condition Pakistan is in today. Just a press of that red button could change things. Can you trust Pakistan? This brings us to our third straight question now, and that reads, whether the risk of the Pak nuke actually falling into the hands of terrorists, is the world community not aware of this? Because just imagine or fathom a situation where you have these terrorists, these jihadi elements, holding the entire world to ransom. Are we prepared to deal with a situation like that? For a moment, just think. The fourth straight question now, that's equally important in this entire conversation, and that reads, what about the international community? What about a lot of those people who've been trying to do a lot of monkey balance, who've been also trying to tell us that dial down tensions? What about them? So will the international community intervene? That's the fourth straight question. This brings us to our fifth straight question, ladies and gentlemen, and that reads, who will tame Pakistan's nuclear blackmail? Pakistan is into nuclear blackmail. This is proven. It's a hard fact. It's a reality. But is it time now to tame Pakistan? And like they say, who will bell the cat? Let's quickly go back now to our panel of guests, and we'll put out more details when it comes to India's nuclear doctrine, what really are the rules, what really are the warheads when it comes to both sides in just a moment. But Dr. Tara Kartha, let's begin by asking you, do you believe this is time to tame Pakistani nukes, and who will do that?
Oh, I think it's over time to tame Pakistan nukes, not because of anything else, except that over the last 6 to 7 years, I mean, before that, I would have said professional army, 10 years ago. Now, I have serious doubts. Because the I don't know where the terrorism ends and the Pakistan army begins. I honestly don't know.
Yes.
Even the fact that this partnership is so close, especially now when you look at the lower levels, one you've got at the ISI level, they're training XYZ, and all these guys are milling around. At the lower levels, where the Pakistan army actually operates in terms of say brigadier and below colonel level,
Yes.
I don't know. And this is when the Khalid Kidwai, who's the major strategician, and he's very good. I mean, Khalid Kidwai is an really respected person. He talks of zero range nuclear weapons. What does that mean? I mean, that to my mind means a person going and putting something there and then that thing bursts. Or it is a nuclear mine. I don't know. But whatever it means that the command of that nuclear weapon has gone down to the lowest levels. That is my problem. And of course, the general behavior and everything over the years, which
Okay.
shows that, rattling their nuclear weapons at any other time. Which other nuclear weapon state behaves like this?
That is true, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. I also now do see Robert Dobbs, who's an expert on intelligence and counter-terrorism, and he's joining us also on our show. Robert, good evening and welcome to Newsnight. We'll take the opening comments from everyone before we put out India's nuclear doctrine, because I think that is also something that viewers would be interested in to know that what is it that India follows when it comes to its nuclear doctrine, because when it comes to Pakistan, like they say, the more things change, the more they remain the same, and they clearly do not follow any rule book. Now, Major Manik M. Jolly, when you heard what you heard from the Raksha Mantri today, when we heard the Prime Minister saying that this is not the age of nuclear blackmail and do not think that India will ever cave in, how do you sense these two responses and the timing?
Yeah, thank you. I think what Raksha Mantri said comes in light of the capability we displayed in hitting Sargodha and the much talked about single strike at the entrance of the caves of the nuclear storage. Whether it happened or not is a different thing. But the precision strike shows that we called out the nuclear buff by saying we can strike you wherever you want, even if you try to move them around. Because nuclear assets are not only very well hidden, but they are very prone to being moved around whenever the emergency strikes. And what you said in the first 5 straight questions you were asking, I think what Dr. Tara said answers most of them by single line, that we don't know who controls them, because there is no line defining the terrorist and the ISI. So when you don't know who holds the control, when the executive council, the authority, the person who presses the button, the person who guards it, the person who commands their move and all is not clear, it means we just don't know who has the authority to fire them. And also what she brought out about in modern militaries, there are things about tactical nukes and all, but if you take them down to just a personal level, that's a very dangerous thing if these people are, claiming it, although we've never seen of it. But when we see Pakistan as a whole, there is not a chance to be taken with them, because they are a rogue nation, a fractured community in terms of government, machinery and military.
Okay.
So there is nobody you can trust, place your faith on, that maybe they will take a responsible decision and not go ahead with it. So what I felt personally was that it is right time for the Raksha Mantri, Defence Minister, to actually ask the international community that you guys need to step up and, take cognizance of the fact that we have a rogue guy sitting with a very volatile and civilizational weapon with them, and we should, take them to account and denuclearize them if required.
And I think everyone who's watching the show and all of us here together, we do know that this is an open secret. But then, Dr. Singh, will the world take note? Will we look at those powers who believe that they are superpowers, who believe that they are the ones calling the shots, helping each other sign deals and whatnot? Will they take note, or will they continue to be self-centric? Because this is just not India's problem.
Pakistan's proliferation of its nuclear program happened under the very eyes of all the major powers, particularly China and the United States. So they were very well aware of where Pakistan was heading. They condoned its nuclear program. They supported it covertly, overtly. And now we're at a situation, I think what we should also look at is, unlike most responsible nuclear weapon states who treat nuclear weapons as an insurance for the ultimate, it's a political weapon in a sense. It's not a usable system. For the Pakistanis, they treat it like a hand grenade. They have tactical nuclear weapons, and they have a doctrine that openly declares that they will use nuclear weapons on Indian forces when they have entered into Lahore. And I mean, it's a complete mind-blowing doctrine, because what you're doing is you are going to distribute your nuclear assets down the chain of command to Pakistani army commanders, which it's been alluded to in a radicalized, hostile, venomous relationship with your adversary. The idea of a concert of cool, calm, collected heads at the highest levels of the apex. That's how the decision to use nuclear weapons is done. I mean, let's not forget, the only case of a use of nuclear weapons was undertaken by the United States when it had a nuclear monopoly in 1945. There has been no instance where states have brandished and used this kind of a nuclear blackmail. So I think what the international community should look at is, and by the way, India has belled the cat. I think this bluff and this idea that that Pakistan could use its nuclear weapons to engage in all kinds of coercion at the lowest ends of the spectrum of violence. This bluff has been called. I think India has shown that we are not even going to look at all that stuff. We're going to deal with you at a conventional level in a controlled, calibrated way. And I think the Pakistan army, ironically, themselves recognize that the bluff has been called, which is why they are sort of scurrying around for now, looking at how their conventional capabilities are matching up with India, which are the areas they need to improve. So I think this is where the real game is going to be played. But as for the international community, they truly should, at least the leverage that they have, massive amounts of development aid, IMF, Pakistani generals' funds parked in Western hedge funds. So you're talking of an entire range of big economic actors today who can actually hold and put a sense of restraint and responsibility into the management of these assets.
That's
and
a
India,
good point.
by belling the cat, India has finally put an end to this idea that this is going to be a one-sided game of brinksmanship. India is saying we are now accepting your game, and we've called your bluff, and we are not. It doesn't escalate into a major crisis. It can stay contained, and there will be costs for your prosecution of your cross-border proxy.
Totally. Yes, I think, Dr. Singh, you also made some fantastic points. And Robert, why don't you take this ahead? Because, would it be fair to say that, listen, when does a country want to show you or project that, oh, listen, these are our nuclear warheads? Either when it is losing a war or it is really scared. And for Pakistan, I think both the case scenarios work very well.
Well, I think we have to understand that with the Pakistan nuclear arsenal, that the United States has a specialized team that's basically on call 24 hours, 7 days a week. Special Operations Command, which is U.S. Navy SEALs, U.S. Delta Force, and U.S. Army Rangers that, I can't say what location they're at, but they're within a probably hour engagement of the country of Pakistan. So should any nuclear weapons either fall into the hands of some sort of jihadist or it would be some sort of aggression, the United States government, and this plan has been in place for over 20 years now, that they would intercept the nuclear weapons and take control of them.
So, Robert, if this is actually so well known, and like Dr. Tara, Major Manik, and also Dr. Zorawar mentioned this very, very clearly, I want to know, why is the world not doing enough for this? And this is going to be the next bit of our conversation. But before that, for the benefit of our viewers, let's get you Newsnight's deep dive. This is where I'll tell you more about India's nuclear doctrine. So what really is this nuclear doctrine, and why is it so important to look at this? What we'll try to do is put out those details for you to help you understand this. The first big point that you see is the NFU. Now, NFU actually means no first use, that we are not going to be the first one who's going to be initiating any kind of nuclear attack, something that has been reiterated, spoken about in multiple times by the Prime Minister, even by the Raksha Mantri earlier. This brings us to a second big point when it comes to India's nuclear doctrine, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is again very, very important. It is called minimum deterrence. This essentially means that you will have arsenals, but only enough to deter any kind of nuclear threats. But you will be out of the arms race, something again and again that is being discussed and spoken about, that we are not a part of the arms race, but just enough for deterrence. This brings us to a third important point on this nuclear doctrine, and that reads massive retaliation. That in case, remember, we are struck, what the enemy should be ready is for a devastating response to any kind of nuclear strike. Something again that is written in stone, and you're looking at India actually following this to the T. This brings us to our final important point, which is significant. Significant because you're dealing with a rogue state, rogue, R-O-G-U-E, like the Raksha Mantri today said about Pakistan. That is about civilian control. Because all kind of decisions, remember, nuclear decisions will happen only by the civilian leadership. This is absolutely clear, because here in the country, unlike in Pakistan, you have a civilian leadership that takes all these calls. But in Pakistan, we all know that who calls the shots? The deep state, the GHQ Rawalpindi, and that is where this story really changes. And if you're wondering that why don't I have details of the Pakistan's nuclear doctrine, I must tell you there isn't anything to actually tell you, because Pakistan does not play by the rule book. So helping you understand this, I will in fact go back to our panel of guests. And this is where we will put our focus now on what can be done, what should be done, and why has the world till now not taken a note of this. We'll take about a minute each with everyone so that everyone is able to put forward their points. Dr. Tara, you go first.
On what the world should do, I'm very skeptical, to be honest. Because like Mr. Dobbs said, they are very well aware of the problem, but for whatever reason, nobody stepped forward. But the only thing is, I just want to say, we've used our nuclear weapons, which are under very, very tight civilian control, to the extent that even the armed forces don't exercise based on a nuclear option. That is sometimes a little regrettable in my view, but nonetheless, that is the steel wall. Right now, in this case, we've used our nuclear weapons to grow the economy, to avoid war avoidance. With Pakistan, is the exact opposite. That is the problem. If they use their nuclear weapons to grow, we have no problem with that. So someone has to persuade, and that someone would be the US, hopefully China, who has a stake here in the $1 billion program, to persuade Pakistan, okay, keep your nukes. We get that you're conventionally weak, but use this to stabilize your country. Or you give up the weapons, then that money you allocate for your people, for the growth of your people, which they won't do. So let's be realistic, right? But someone has to push them to say, please use these nuclear weapons to stabilize yourself. That's all they have to do.
But again, Dr. Tara, you and I both know that is never happening. Pakistan plays by plausible deniability forever. In spite of any kind of evidence, it never agrees that, yes, it is Pakistan behind all these terror elements. It will never believe that you've had the headquarters in Bahawalpur and Muridke being pummeled by the Indian forces. So, Major Jolly, what according to you possibly now should be the next step in escalation when it comes to India calling Pakistan's nuclear bluff? But what more? What next?
So, if we are limiting ourselves to conventional war only, I think before the land forces move and it translates into the full-scale war, or the naval blockade happens, the Navy takes over, I think India still has option of a lot of missiles and air raids to go ahead with. If we are talking of escalation, the next, if we continue calling the nuclear bluff off as we have done, the quantity, the quantum, the quality of attacks can increase a lot. The depth in which we plan to go can increase a lot. Targets can keep getting more and more specific and strategic in nature. I think we can start cornering them and showing them our capability, blocking all their weaponry and weapon system, missiles coming in. That's a great, the way we have done so far. I think, but I still think the master stroke is still the water treaty. We can fire as many weapons and they can repel and they can do the same. But till the time we have control over the water, I think that is a turning point. And I'll just take a 30-second thing to reiterate what Dr. Tara said, that in spite of the applaud Raksha Mantri to finally say that, but international community is not going to do anything about it. There is no precedence of that kind of a caution or a reprimand happening to Pakistan, and worse than that, there is no possibility of Pakistan acting over it. So I think the only possibility I still see that can happen is Pakistan being made to realize that you are a rogue guys, you do not have control, you are broken down. So we'll have a better audit. We'll have a control international community team that will be there to permanently monitor. There will be a layer of control. There's an executive committee, there's authority, there's a button presser, all that. But there will be a joint committee that will be there in between before you actually press the red button. I think that's the only thing. This denuclearization is not going to happen, that's for sure. They're never going to hand over their weapon. But I think for better control, we can still ask for the community to step in and coordinate.
Dr. Singh, are you hopeful? Are you hopeful that the world will take note? Because like I said, this cannot just be treated as an India problem or something that just affects the Indian subcontinent. It's a far bigger problem. And knowing what's been happening at the FATF with the IMF loan, I think the writing is on the wall that this is a deeply divided world which is self-centric, looking at their own interests.
Indeed. So, there is a little bit of sort of precedence elsewhere where states, nuclear weapon states, do not have complete control over the use and actual use of the weapon. So, example is, of course, the UK. They have nuclear weapon submarines, the Trident, but the ultimate authority for those systems rests with the White House. Now, I know, of course, in this case, Pakistan, neither of its allies in Washington or Beijing want this kind of a responsibility because they then are involved in a crisis where their ally may just drag into a major, but there is possible. I mean, we're thinking out of the box here. In the coming years, possibly the United Nations Security Council undertakes some kind of a trusteeship or some kind of IEA safeguards. There are several sort of scenarios that could play out where Pakistan's insurance card is a political level, where their state survival, everything is insured, where they have strategic weapons, but these sort of scattered tactical systems which can sort of go out of hand, from terrorism, overzealous commanders, to all kinds of command and control. Like, in fact, this crisis showed that Pakistan might not even be in full control over the security of its nuclear assets because they're all in bases that have conventional systems, all in close proximity to each other. So given Pakistan's geography, it is kind of it's put itself in a situation where it's expanded its arsenal to systems that it wants to use on its own soil, and now it has to unwind that process and come to some kind of an understanding with India where, see, India is a status quo power. It has no desire to occupy, control any part of Pakistani territory or engage in coercion. It is responding to terrorism. It is Pakistan that is the revisionist state. So I think the first principle, if we're building a narrative, is if you have a revisionist state that is now been using weapons which are not designed for war, and it was not only blackmailing India, it was blackmailing the West, the East for aid. And now if that bluff is being called by India in a very responsible way, hopefully Beijing and Washington will sort of think through, because it is not in their interest to see an unraveling of South Asian regional security, Asian security.
Yes, Dr. Singh, I mean, I think again you've touched a raw nerve of a lot of people, but I must also say that Pak-occupied Kashmir is again a conversation that does generate a lot of interest. Only for want of time I came in there because I just want to give the last 40 seconds, I'm told by my team, to Robert here before we close this conversation. Now, Robert, you spoke about terrorists, the jihadi elements. Does the world not think that what will happen if these nukes fall into their hands?
Well, this is why you see the United States government through the Special Operations Command, like I said, for almost 20 years now, has a contingency plan, and they have this constantly monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Another thing I would say is you see with President Trump's administration, he basically pushed Pakistan and India to come to a ceasefire agreement. And,
no, I don't know whether he did or not, because India has made it very clear that this was Pakistan that came running for conversation and for a ceasefire.
Well, yeah, but
I don't think that part of the story is true. But Robert, does it establish the fact that US is self-centric? It is not looking at the larger problem. Why can't it rain in Pakistan?
Well, this is why you see that there is significant financial leverage that
But
the
the loan
United
came
States.
in. The loan came in from the IMF for Pakistan.
Well, I mean, you look at this has been an ongoing problem, for the last 20 years, as far as if you could say the misallocation of these IMF loans that basically have been stolen by the oligarchy within the country.
It's easy because people keep shifting the blame, Robert. Apologies, because I've completely run out of time, but I'm going to ensure that you come back on our show another night and we continue this conversation from where we are leaving. Tara and all gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. It's been a fascinating and an enlightening conversation. And now quickly, let's get you Newsnight's parting shot. So remember, tonight we have to ask that will the global community continue to look the other way, or will it finally confront the harshest question of our times? What is that? That can Pakistan, that is politically unstable, it is financially bankrupt, it has multiple problems, there is chaos within. You look at what's happening in Balochistan. Can you trust that rogue state with nuclear weapons? This, remember, like I've said for the nth time on the show, that this, ladies and gentlemen, is just not India's concern only. It is the world's wake-up call. So the world needs to wake up. For the moment, thank you for watching. Good night.